Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to NGI's event on offshore wind, which we have called More Megawatts for the Money. Or how can research, new technology and innovations make offshore wind more profitable? Because that's needed. We know that this is quite an essential discussion. We need the offshore wind as part of the energy mix in the future, when we are phasing out oil and gas and going towards a carbon neutral world. But we have seen that the last few years, offshore wind development has slowed a little bit down because of cost, higher cost, both finance cost, of course, with the higher interest rates, but also rising costs in the supply chain. And questions has been raised about, is offshore wind cost efficient enough, and can it really provide energy security? So if you look at the situation in Norway, we are not a big player at the moment. There is one commercial project producing offshore wind in Norway, that's Hywind Tampen, producing or installed capacity of 95 megawatts. It began production in 2022, so a few years ago. And there has been a lot of talk, but more projects are now coming, like Sørlige Nordsjø 2, which is currently under development by Ventyr, and will be Norway's first bottom-fixed wind farm. And then Utsira Nord, which will be a floating wind, was tendered, officially launched in May this year. So we are waiting for who is winning those tenders. And the NVE, the Norwegian Water and Resource Agency, has identified 4 other suitable zones for offshore wind development in Norway. So why does NGI take and bring this on the agenda here in Arendal? And some of you know NGI, but not everyone. So I'm going to say a few words about NGI and our experience in offshore foundation technology. So NGI is an independent research institute doing research and also consulting and laboratory and instrumentation work in geotechnical and geosciences. We provide geotechnical and geoscientific expertise with a particular focus on climate, energy, and the environment for everyone to be on safe ground. And today's topic, like offshore wind, that's one of our key strategic areas, has been for the last 4 years, will be for the coming 4 years, and is also one of NGI, I'll say probably our largest market, has been for the last 4 or 5 years. Mostly this has been, NGI has been involved in international projects in Europe and Asia and the Americas. But NGI's experience with the offshore technology and offshore foundation technology began in the 70s, of course, with the oil and gas. And NGI was doing technology development and design for the Ekofisk platform, which was installed in 1973. And since then, we have been part of the technology journey that has shaped offshore engineering for the oil and gas industry, and now, for the last 15 years, also for the offshore wind industry. NGI has expertise, mainly then from international projects, and has been involved in projects to a total of 40 gigawatts. And that's 500 Hywind Tampen. We have been providing these services through our offices here in Norway, but also from our offices in the US, in Houston and Boston, and in Australia, where we have an office in Perth. And soon we will be establishing an office in London, in UK. The offshore wind market shows significant growth despite what you read, and despite the slowdown and the challenges that we see with the cost efficiency, there is still a prognosis for Europe to double the capacity within the next 5 years. So that's a significant amount of work that's going in there. And the world needs this energy, of course, for reducing the carbon emissions. And Norway, we are an energy and maritime nation. I think it's really part of us to take part in the offshore energy or offshore wind adventure. We should have ambitions to contribute there because we have a lot to contribute with. And NGI look forward to helping Norway establish its own offshore wind energy projects and bring the learning that we have accumulated through these last 15 years on projects in places like the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Taiwan. And we will get back to some of these experiences in today's presentations. We have brought together some of the leading experts on offshore wind to discuss 3 essential questions. 1, how can we use the experiences from countries like the UK and the Netherlands, which has come much farther than Norway? How can we use this to make Norwegian offshore wind projects more profitable? And what innovative technologies can Norway supply to the world? And 3rd, which breakthroughs can lower costs and increase efficiency in offshore wind development? So together with all of you, I look forward to listening and learning today. So hopefully we can get more power for the money. Enjoy. And then it's Thomas, I guess.
Thank you, Lars. My name is Øydis Kasberg. I'm the head of communications at NGI.
And I'm Liv Rønnebekk Bjergene, Senior Communication Advisor at NGI. And together with Øydis, we will be guiding you through this event.
So we'll start with 2 short introductions, followed by a panel discussion. So first of all, we'll have NGI's Director of Offshore Energy, Thomas Langford. He's responsible for NGI's activities, both in Norway and internationally, within offshore and marine sectors. So he will talk about Norwegian technology as an export catalyst, a new industrial phase in deeper waters. So let's see if we can find your presentation. Let's see.
Thank you very much, Liv, Øydis, and Lars for the introduction. We'll just get the presentation up here. Somewhere.
Right.
See if that clicks as
Oh.
well. Yeah, the last time I was here at Arendalsuka, then offshore wind is what I would have called a bit of a niche subject. There certainly weren't as many sessions. There weren't as many people talking about this. But I would say now it's become a very, very important issue for us as a society, also for the election, for instance, with the supply chain strategy issued by the government last week, which digs into a lot of the experience we've had, but looking forward to what we need to do to develop in the future as well. And I thought to share, as Lars said, most of what we've done so far has been internationally in other parts of the world. So I thought to share this global perspective a little bit with you today. I think we all know the energy transition is extremely important, but it's not easy. And these sorts of societal transformations are never going to be easy. But what we've seen over the last year has also been a lot of global conflicts, a lot of things like trade disputes, economic uncertainty, and what was already not easy, I would say, has become less easy for us with time as well. But it doesn't mean we can't do it, and we shouldn't do it. We need the energy, we need the molecules that we've got with traditional energy and also with hydrogen, but we also need the electrons that we generate with renewable electricity as well. We've got lots of industries that depend on that. We've got society that depends on that as well. But that energy needs to be low carbon because we have a climate problem that we're dealing with at the same time. So what we see here, this is taken from a DNV report, there's also these barriers, the things that make it challenging for us. And as a researcher, as an engineer, I'm not going to solve all of these alone, but we know that research and engineering has a role to play in many of these things as well, and that's the reason that organizations like NGI are involved in this as well. Offshore wind isn't a new thing. It might seem a newish thing, at least in Norway, but if we look at the map here, which is taken from TGS, this shows offshore wind areas around northwestern Europe. Many of these already developed, generating energy, some of these already 2 decades old, for instance, in the UK, around Denmark. So it's a huge industry that's already in place. What we do see is that there are challenges, not just in Norway. So if I look, for instance, at Sweden, there were a huge number of areas there under development, and the ones in the Baltic Sea were actually cancelled in November 2024 due to concerns about potential conflicts between radar and missiles coming from further east in Europe. If we look at Denmark, then they had an auction last year in December where they received no bids. They've now redesigned that process, so the next auction should hopefully learn from that. And just last week in Germany, then we had an auction that also received no bids, and the same thing is going to have to happen there as well. Upcoming, we've got the new auction round 7 happening in the UK, but also in Norway, as Lars mentioned with Utsira Nord. We're going to have a process there. Bids, or the first round of bids, expressions of interest that are going to come in on the 15th of September, the week after the Norwegian national election as well. But there is growth. If we look at the graph in the bottom, you don't really need to look at the numbers, but the dark green is the growth that we've had until now. The light green is an example of one of the forecasts that we've got within the offshore wind industry up until 2034. And it's huge. It's not just small steps. This is a huge investment for society and for the world, and it's very important for us as people, but also for our industries to make this happen. So there's a lot to do, and as Europe, I think we have to stand strong, stand together, and perhaps also think, well, what's the point of the guy on the left-hand side? It's to do whatever he doesn't do, I think, for Europe's sake. We talk a lot about energy costs, and energy costs are quite complicated. There's no single cost. We're often talking about cost curves with all different sorts of energy technology. So whatever the energy technology we're looking at, there'll be curves of reduction with time as they mature, as they get more used, as we build more projects. And it doesn't happen overnight. That's very important. Here, we're looking at a 30-year timescale. So just bear that in mind. That's a whole generation. And it can be a little bit daunting to think that you want to be part of that cost reduction curve. But think what's happened in countries like Germany and the UK and the Netherlands is they've been part of that cost reduction in bottom fixed wind, and that has given them both energy, which they've used then to stimulate industry and actually build things and do things as society. But also they've given themselves this first mover advantage so that, as we develop, as we expand into the rest of the world, we're in a much, much stronger position, or they are in a much stronger position and to export these services elsewhere. Norway's latched onto that a bit without the benefits of having built this in Norway as well. But we haven't got the energy. And as we move to the point where we're not going to have an energy surplus anymore, we need to plan longer term and think about combining these two things, our own energy, but also building an export industry as well. The curve at the top is floating wind. So that's the one that's the most expensive at the moment, and it is expensive. Part of this gives us an incentive to build as much bottom fixed wind as possible, which is what we're seeing in Sørlige Nordsjø 2. It's also given Norway access to some important worldwide projects in Scotland, one I'll show in a minute in Asia, where Norway is leading the world in some of these technologies. So that's a good thing. We shouldn't just build floating wind for the sake of it, but many of the projects in Norway are going to be floating, and we need to prepare ourselves for that. But also think, again, this will give us energy, and it will give us an export advantage as well. So the costs will come down, but they don't come down, just by talking about it, showing a curve. They don't just come down through research. They come down also through building projects. This is a nice slide, and many versions of this get shown at typical offshore wind conferences, and it all looks very good. It's nice to see things getting bigger and better, and in a way generating more energy per turbine. But there are issues with this as well. So, the bigger we get, the more things we have to develop and build to support the size of the turbines on top. So, I think for us who've been working in industry for many, many years, we see also that it's important not to just make things bigger and try to out-compete each other with the size of the turbine, but actually think about standardization, think about trying to keep things the same for a while so that we can have vessels and foundations and cables, everything else that works to support the turbines that we're putting there. So it's not to stop developing completely, but to actually think a bit of stabilization can do us a lot of good in building a robust supply chain. So that's one of the focus areas we might get into in the discussion later. This is very generic. Not all of this has really been about geotechnics. But I thought I'd show you one picture. This is just from a few weeks ago. So it's a project that we've been involved in as NGI. It's not in Europe. This is in Taiwan on the west coast. And yeah, this is a Norwegian success story. This is something that we helped develop together with Statoil and with Shell for oil and gas platforms in the 1990s in the North Sea. And now we've helped to export this technology to the rest of the world. It's nice to have Jan here who's speaking next, because this was first used in offshore wind in a project supported by the Carbon Trust in Germany 11 years ago, and is now for deeper water one of the most trusted solutions that we've got for offshore wind. And then finally, standing here representing a research institute, just to show, we're doing authentic, groundbreaking research as well within floating wind in a project for the EU, led with a consortium across the world, but with several Norwegian partners. And here looking, again, both in reducing cost, but making sustainable solutions that can actually make floating wind both scalable and give the minimum impact to the environment as well. So thanks for the time. I think you guys will hand over next.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm happy to introduce Jan Mathisen, Director of Research and Development, Offshore Wind for Carbon Trust UK. So Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Yeah, thank you. And Thomas, it's nice to see the suction bucket structure actually being really used in commercial projects. I'm probably the only person in this room who doesn't speak a word of Norwegian. So I'm really grateful that we can have this whole session basically for me in English. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for this. Yeah, I'm Jan Mathisen. I'm a director at the Carbon Trust. And the Carbon Trust, I have a very short presentation, just a few slides. The Carbon Trust, we are a non-for-profit organization, initially set up by the UK government, but now we are fully independent, around 500 people working internationally to help companies and governments with the energy transition. So we also have offices in Amsterdam, in Singapore, in Mexico, and South Africa. In offshore wind, we are doing, on one side, joint industry programs, and I will come back to this as an example of how industry really progressed and used quite a strong approach around research and development. And on the other side, we are providing advisory work to governments and to industry to help them with the energy transition, to navigate the energy transition for them. So joint industry program is an approach that we identified around 15 years ago. It's very much used in the offshore oil and gas sector as well, basically working together, learning together. And we are working with developers that you can see on the screen there. So these are the organizations that are installing the offshore wind farms. And then we're using a so-called market pull approach. So basically, these are the customers of the technology that will buy the cables, the foundations. And they identify the problems. And then we are working with technology providers, research institutions like NGI, to basically bring solutions to the market, to these developers. And we are facilitating and helping the discussion. So there are a number of programs we are running. The Offshore Wind Accelerator is sort of our flagship program, looks at fixed installed offshore wind and cost reduction, running since 2008. We have a program specifically on floating to really help commercialize floating wind. The offshore wind joint industry program looks at environmental consenting, the environmental aspects, which is increasingly important because we have many more wind farms in the North Sea, so environmental considerations are critical. System integration as well. We need to get all the electricity, all the power that we are generate into the system. So how can we do this? How can we improve the grid infrastructure? What can we do in terms of hydrogen? And then sustainability. We need to develop offshore wind in a sustainable way. We need to make sure that the carbon footprint of wind farms, even so they don't generate dirty electricity, but it takes a lot of energy to produce the steel, the concrete, and so on. So how can we do this better? I have some examples of some projects, just to make this a little bit more tangible, and in a way sort of connects a little bit what Thomas said, standardization and industrialization. In our mind, the sector needs to move to the next phase, to really scale up, to really grow up. And it's probably something to pick up in the discussion in a minute. But just some examples. We are using vessels to take engineers offshore to bring them to the turbines, to fix the turbines, so-called crew transfer vessels. And as the engineers are working on the turbines, these vessels are waiting and using fuel. So wouldn't it be great if these vessels can be run on batteries and charged at the wind farm during waiting time? So we created a common connector and an offshore charging standard, basically, that is now used and to use basically battery-powered vessels. In the past, the boat landing to transfer technicians from the vessel to the structure, every wind farm had a different design. So fender systems on vessels had to change. It was basically a nightmare. So we created a standardized boat landing design that's now the same throughout all the wind farms. So that helps to increase safety. There's a development of a cable burial protection index, basically a guide how deep do you need to bury your cable to protect it. Cable failures has been a big issue in the industry. There are lots of cable connecting all the turbines, and then you have one big cable connecting the wind farm to a substation onshore. So if you have a failure on this cable, it's costly and it's not nice. So helping to reduce cable failures is reducing cost. And then also, as Thomas highlighted in his presentation, we have much larger turbines. So there's more power coming from the turbines, so we need to connect turbines at a higher voltage level. So we engage with industry to see what is the next voltage level that we need to see for future turbines, and 132 kV has been sort of identified with stakeholder engagement, and now there's work happening around with cable designers and manufacturers to design new cables and basically prepare the industry for the next voltage level that we need to see. So there are some examples of how standardization and industry guidance sort of help grow up the sector. And that is all from my side. Thank you.
You can just stay. Yep. Jan, if you stick with us, we'll continue with the panel discussion. We'll have Thomas back up. We'll also introduce Knut Eriksten. He's fagsjef havvind I Norsk Industri.
Og Jon Evang, som bransjedirektør havvind Fornybar Norge.
Så har vi Gudmund Bartnes, som he's market analysis manager at Vårgrønn, Norway's offshore wind developer.
And our last person, with over 2,000 events taking place. Politicians are not so easy to secure, dedicated politicians, but Olav Elvestuen, we're so happy to have you here from Venstre.
All right. Let's just start. You guys have a microphone that you share, so be friendly, okay? So to everyone, why are profitability and cost efficiency such central topics for offshore wind in Norway? So why is profitability and cost efficiency important in Norway for building offshore wind? Name one. Yeah.
Well, I can start at least.
Good.
Thank you for holding this event, and that's of course the question we all ask ourselves: how can we handle the cost challenges in floating offshore wind? And I think that the presentations show some of the things that are important to achieve. Industrialization is a key, and standardization is a key. And also I would like to add, it's very important that we have a long perspective on this. It is a 10 or 20 years perspective, as you showed. It's 25 years till 2050, and we need to have that perspective on it. And Norway, along with other countries, has to contribute with projects so that we can achieve a critical mass where we can achieve then industrialization. Because it's first when we have a certain amount of projects that we will be able to industrialize and standardize. So let's say if there are 7 or 8 countries that are now seriously involved in floating offshore wind, if each of them invest in, let's say, 1 or 2 projects with 500 megawatts, that could be accumulated to a critical mass where we can achieve huge cost reduction potential in floating offshore wind.
And as I'm the only from the political party here, I can say a little bit, but then I can take a little broader role. Because I think where we are now, because if you went to Arendalsuka a few years ago, everyone would be for wind farms, offshore wind farms here. That was a broad agreement. It was just how to do it. But right now, if you look at the Norwegian political landscape, is very fragmented, and it's fragmented kind of like on both main sides. So I think that it's really important that you start to show that costs are going down, and it's the right direction. So you can start to also in the discussions consider this is an investment in Norway, because in Norway, with all our renewable energy, it's not that you get a wind farm. It's not an automatic that the emissions go down, as you have in other countries. Then you need the added-on policies to get emissions down. So it's not a necessity as such. So it's much more also an industrial possibility that we have, because you have so much resources, and you have also the activity that we need as the oil and gas are going down. So really to show, and offshore wind, especially floating, as I've always said, it's strong will over time. And that is kind of like where we are now, with the elections also coming up, is to keep that strong will, so you can trust it, and you also internationally can trust that it's there, and it's moving forward. And then you can argue how fast and how big Utsira Nord will come up, but there should be no doubt that when Hywind Tampen is still the largest one, now you have to make the next one. And everyone should know that Norwegian Parliament has that will to make the next one, and then to show that costs are going down. Bottom fixed, there's one thing, and that Norway has to attach this itself on towards the cooperation around the North Sea. And with every ifs and buts into that. No special things at all, just be part of that cooperation.
But Gudmund, I know that when we look to the UK, for example, the politicians there have a different approach maybe than we have, and they have been very successful in developing the wind farms. So what, in your opinion, is that we can learn from the UK?
Yeah, so thank you. So I represent Vårgrønn, offshore wind developer with projects in the UK, and also with interest in the Utsira Nord upcoming auction. So I think in one way there are similarities between Norway and the UK, and that is on the target side. We have ambitious targets for offshore wind in Norway, and so do they have in the UK. The main difference is on basically everything else. UK have policies that are backing the targets. They have annual auctions where they give out state subsidies to the projects so that it's an attractive investment climate. And in Norway, we have had one auction that almost failed, ended up with 2 bidders, and we have Utsira Nord, which has been postponed 2 years, and we are now upcoming, but still with a certain degree of political uncertainty. And after Utsira Nord, we have targets, but no real proper policies or clear timeline on what we can expect the coming 5 to 10 years in terms of megawatts. So I think the key learning that Norwegian politicians can take from the UK market is backing the targets with clear policies.
And then a follow-up question to you, Knut Erik. Can we adopt the European business model, or do we need to develop our own?
Can you repeat the question, please?
If we can adopt a European business model, or do we here in Norway need to develop our own?
Both, but I would just make a short introduction as well about how we kind of address the industry. And I think at least we in Federation of Norwegian Industry, and maybe the industry as a whole, has made a mistake in the last years. We had focused so much on how, and we talked about all the technical solutions and contracts for difference. It's been so technical, and we have forgot to really put emphasis on why. Why are we doing this? And I think that should still be kind of front-loaded, the question why we do this. And there are several reasons, but one main reason, of course, is that we need electricity. If you look at the DNV yearly report and other reports, the Energy Transition Norway, we need the electricity. And you mentioned cost. We believe this is the less expensive way to produce large amount of electricity. So that is why you choose offshore wind. If it was easier to flood national parks and put up dams and produce hydropower or other ways of producing power for half the cost, we would have chosen that. But we believe this is the less expensive way to produce a large amount of electricity with the least impact. So that's why we are choosing it. But then the industry has to deliver. And when you talk about cost, you should also discuss when we need electricity, what's the cost of not doing anything? That's what you should measure this against. Because people talk about if it's 70 øre or 1 krone or whatever. What is the cost of not doing anything? And then back to your question, if we can adopt the European kind of contract format. Yes or no? I think we are in the ability, we have the situation where the European market is established, so we can learn. I mean, France, RTE, the way they solve the grid issues, maybe that could be a very good way to solve the grid issues for offshore in Norway, with the Statnett taking a bigger part. We've tried the OFTA regime in maybe we can pick elements from there. So we should, in a way, evaluate and cherry pick from the different models. So it's not neither nor. And then, of course, you have all the national regulations that you have to adhere to. So someone is criticizing us for having a Norwegian solution which is cost-driven. All countries has to adhere to their own national regulations as well. So that's not typical for Norway. So it's, yes, both.
Yeah.
So... Yeah.
Just one comment on I agree with everything that was said. I think, but it's also important that to put things a little bit into perspective, because we are still sort of really at the beginning in offshore wind generally. In total, we have, I think, around 85 gigawatt installed globally. That's 35 in Europe, and then a large part is in China. If you compare this to onshore wind, there are 1,000 gigawatts of onshore wind is installed. If you compare this with coal power, there are 2,000 gigawatts of coal power. So we have 85 globally. So we are the toddlers in a way. We still need the support from the parents and to guide us and to grow up. So we haven't been, and so that also means there's a lot of scope to learn, to make mistakes, and to learn from the mistakes, and to pick the right solutions for the industry too. I think it's important to just sort of, put these things a little bit into perspective.
Thomas, you showed us the numbers with the floating wind farms. Some critics claim that they will never be profitable. Is that true?
I mean, it's using the word profitable. I think the cost comparison is essential for us to understand how these things develop with time, and it compared them to other energy sources. I didn't show other energy sources on there, but there are those that are more expensive, and that's the reason that we do it. And if we'd have looked at the cost curve for bottom fixed wind, 20 years ago, that would have also been way up there. So yes, it's expensive at the moment. Yes, it requires additional support. But again, when you develop that, you'll bring the cost down, you'll develop energy, and you'll provide a basis for industrialization. This morning, I went to one of the many sessions. I mean, there's a lot of offshore wind, but there's also a lot of sessions on data centers, on AI here this week. All of that requires power as well. So if Norway's going to have its new industrial adventures, it needs the power, and that's going to stimulate other things. So yes, costs an important discussion, but put that into the context again. What happens if we don't have the energy? Things will stop. We won't develop.
Which technological innovation do you consider look most promising now in terms of offshore wind to be successful? It's for the whole panel, so just...
Yep.
I don't think that will be one single element, and you mentioned industrialization. I think you need to take, if you've been to one of the turbine factories and look at the lean production there, it's really like a car factory. It's just so streamlined. You have to take that level of industrialization bring that offshore, so you have to bring that into the offshore developments when it comes to installation, both for the foundation, the turbines, and the grid, and all the regulatory work. So you have to get the same level of industrialization for the whole project development and the whole value chain as you have for the turbine manufacturing. So that's just hard work, a lot of elements, and not one single good idea that will bring all the costs down, unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah, I could just add to Knut Erik that I fully agree on that, and it's important to say Norwegian industry is quite well equipped to do this. We have the oil and gas experience, which we can build on, but one very important difference is, of course, the serial and the mass production that we need to achieve to industrialize and to be able to cut cost for each unit we make. If it comes to floater or anchoring system or whatever it is, we have to I think that is the most important thing, to see scale. And I would like to add to Ola then, I'm very glad to hear that Venstre will still support offshore wind. I think it's very important to the industry now that Utsira Nord goes as planned. And then we can discuss how to develop floating offshore wind further. But we will be glad to hear that from all politicians that this will be a long-term commitment and that Utsira Nord will go on as planned.
Yeah, that's what we need in Norway. We need that political patience that is there and the strong enough will. And it's always, I always say that in Norwegian we lack a word, because in English there's a big difference with the policies and politics. We only have the same word, politik, on both sides. So the problem in Norway, and also when you compare to Britain, you have a system that Parliament sets the goals, and then the work to reach them is kind of like set out to do that. And then the two, either Labour or Conservative, they don't really want to go into have a quarrel about how to move forward. That is set out. In Norway, you have a different tradition. Here, everything becomes politics. And parties, they see the opportunities, and it becomes a much more fragmented discussion. And that is kind of like the problem where we are right now. It was not like that a few years ago, but right now it's very much up. Where you have parts you are those that are against offshore wind as such. And then you have the price discussion that is there, kind of like will drive up energy prices, which doesn't make sense at all. So it's really to keep that broad positioning. So we have the patience. And I think also one thing is to show that cost will come down, but also to show what was showed here first, that you already have Norwegian companies that are working around the world, making this a business, that we have companies in Taiwan, that we are an actor that is there, that we need to support. And this Arendal-uka, I mean, there's several discussions on offshore wind here. how can I say, when you sum up those debates, hopefully it is possible to see that you have a more stable majority that will keep this moving. Because that is really the most important that we get now through the fall, that this is being moved forward at the pace that it should.
Gudmund, at Vårgrønn, you're Norway's offshore wind developer, right? And how can, or what do you need for the offshore wind not to become like a political game? How can we ensure predictability? What do you guys need for us to manage that?
Well, I can say that when we are looking at projects, as you saw from the cost curves on how much it costs to build offshore wind, typically you would need some sort of subsidy to have a profitable project. And then it is super important for us to have a market and a framework where we can see that, okay, the money that we put into the project, we will get some sort of return on the money. So I would say that if you have good projects, good sites, good predictable policies, then you attract investors. Look at Sweden 4 or 5 years ago. Basically every offshore wind developer was present in Sweden, looking at sites, developing projects, running towards license, and then the political uncertainty became too high, and then they dropped basically all the projects on the Baltic Sea side of the country. And I don't think that you see barely any activity on the offshore wind side development in Sweden. And that's the consequence of political uncertainty for a market as offshore wind, which is reliant on political willingness to have profitability. So I think you see also the same for Norway on Utsira Nord. How many companies that was interested in developing the project 1 year ago? How many projects and consortia that have now withdrawn from the competition even before the deadline for submitting the qualitative application? I think we are down to around 3 consortia now that has expressed interest. And this is driven by uncertainty, postponed deadlines, subsidy scheme, which is, although it's a lot of money that has been put on the table, it is still a project that will be marginal, with a lot of residual risk. So I think for us as a developer, the key is to have a firm political context that we can develop our project in.
Jan, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think that I really want to support this because there's a lot of focus on cost. Cost is very important and costs need to come down, that's very clear. But risk is the other part in this. And you need to have the more certainty you can create, the more market visibility you can create, the better it is for investors. And in the UK, we have a CFD system, that's a contract for difference, where basically developers together with government set a certain price, a certain strike price, and if the market price is getting below this strike price, then the government is filling up this gap. If the market price is above the strike price, the developers are paying back to government. And that creates certainty for developers for a certain price over 15, now the next auction will have 20-year certainty around this, and that helps. And I think this sort of is creating the right environment, the right market conditions, and then let the investors do the rest, basically.
Ola, short comment.
Yes. I think it's 2 things. One thing is that the whole process with Utsira Nord has to create a result. If there's just no interest and it kind of like stops, that is a crisis. So you have to have the will so that you get a result of the Utsira Nord process. But I also think that in Norway, and Parliament has said it several times, that you also have you have kind of like two ways to offshore wind projects. You have that with Utsira Nord, but you also have, like Hywind Tampen, that you can also connect projects also on towards the offshore sector to lower emissions there. So I think we should look at more possibilities also like Hywind Tampen, because that works.
Very short comments.
Okay.
The 2 of you.
Yep.
Talking about the support regime, I think it's important, and maybe that could be special for Norway to look into, You talked about the contract for difference, and our 2 projects so far has only had contract for difference as the one mechanism. But maybe we should look at combining our mechanism. We have Enova for like a technical project support. We have SIVA. We have XWIN. We have a lot of different structures. And maybe that can be combined into one project. So we don't only kind of run it with the only contract for difference. You can use all these support mechanisms together. I think that should be looked into.
Jon?
Yeah, I could just add to what Ola and Erik said, that I think it's very important to understand that floating offshore wind has already cut costs. If you look at what Equinor have achieved from the Hywind Demo to Hywind Scotland, they achieved some 30 or 40%, I think, even more, I think, to cut cost. And from Hywind Scotland to Hywind Tampen, they reduced the cost with 35%, even if it went over budget. But that shows that even in small scale, they were able to cut cost. And if you look at the slide that you showed, Thomas, it is important to know that everyone believes that the cost will come down substantially. The question is how far it will go. And one last point is that it's all reason to believe, similar to solar, to onshore wind, to bottom fixed wind, that we also will be, with scaling, industrialization, standardization, to cut cost also in floating. All renewable technologies show that. And floating wind has some very easy some scalability that is quite easy to achieve if we get scale. That can cut cost.
Last question to the whole panel. A yes/no question. Is the ambition of 30 GW of offshore wind realistic? Yes or no? Starting with you, Thomas.
I mean, that's not a yes or no question, you know that.
Which one?
It's become less realistic. It's possible, but it requires courage. I think it requires predictability. That's the best word I think we've heard.
Yep.
Guts from both the politicians, but also society, to get behind this and realize that there's long-term benefits with it.
Jan?
Yeah, I would just say yes. I have to be positive and optimistic.
Jon?
Yes, I would like to say yes. Tendered, yes. Operational in 2040, no. But tendered, yes, that's possible.
Yeah, Erik?
Yes, but you go through very different phases. One phase is where you lack electricity. Maybe a middle phase is where you have electricity balance, where you have a different support regime. And a final phase where you have significant surplus, so it has to be fully commercial. And those 3 different phases have very different solutions and different support regimes. So we should really discuss the same phase when we discuss a goal of 30 gigawatts.
Yeah, good man.
As long as the projects are attractive and awarded, then the industry will deliver 30 gigawatts in the speed of light.
Yeah, all right.
And Ola?
Yes, but I think it's hard by 2040.
Yeah.
So it's, but I don't think that also is not the most important to discuss, not at least politically. It's more to get there to where we are now, and now you need the new projects and have the will to use the time that is necessary to get to a position where this starts to run by itself. So it's really to have that strategic political will that this is important for Norway, is important for Norwegian industry, and we have to have the patience, but also the will to move it forward. And then the 40, it's possible to get there, but it doesn't really matter just what day. I have one last good example, because in 2015, I negotiated in the goal that we should only sell EVs in Norway 100% by 2025. Then we sold like 10, 12. No one believed it was possible, but now it's 97%. So it's really about keeping that, holding on to that will to have and have kind of like policies that are strong enough to move forward. So I don't really, if it's this or that, but it has to be strong enough so that we move forward.
Thank you so much to the panel. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. Thank you.